Welcome to the Space Turtle Show, the greatest show in the galaxy. I am one of your hosts, Joey Garvey, and with me today is,
Joshua again. Gonna get tired of me soon.
yeah, we're back at it with another episode.
Amelie this time, my selection. So we'll see how Joey thinks of this film he's never seen before. My apologies for this week, guys, because the quality of the sound is a little bit worse than the others. But we'll have everything figured out before next month at least, and it'll all
For
be back
sure.
to normal. So but we're still coming out with an episode, rain or shine. So I'm gonna say that's a high five to us.
Yeah, we got to keep on grinding.
Okay, but yeah, so we did Amelie this week, and this was my choice. Honestly, the story of why I chose to watch this movie isn't even that great or grandiose or anything. I actually watched it pretty recently. Last year during college, I took freshman year of college, I took a film class. And so we are supposed to watch like a bunch of movies. I bought Netflix to see if there was any of those films that I needed that were required for class on there. Turns out there were very little, and I had to mostly pirate them, but it's okay. When I first opened up Netflix, I saw Amelie. And so I had looked up before like the greatest romance movies of all time, and Amelie always comes up. So I saw it and I was like, oh, like I could go for this movie right now. So I just put it on, and man, I watched it like 3 or 4 times within like 2 days. I just put it on. Yeah, I put it on, watched it through, and then
Gee,
immediately I just watched it again, and then I gave myself a little break and I watched it like the day after and the day after that. So about like 4 times within like 3 days. And honestly, I feel like I rewatching it again this time, I feel like I almost completely misinterpreted it, even though I watched it 4 times.
oh my
It's been about a year
God.
since I watched it again, and so putting it back on recently for the podcast, have like such a different view of the movie now, and honestly love it even more than I did the first time I watched it. But that's mostly because of my personal sympathy or empathizing with Amelie. And so I'm curious to think of what you thought of Joey.
So, you've seen it like 6 or 7 times?
Yeah.
Okay. I I've only seen it a measly once. Uh,
Happens to the best
Uh,
of us.
it was one of the foreign films that I really wanted to watch, and I was looking for an excuse to, so I was really happy when Josh told me to go watch this movie for the podcast. I was like, oh boy. So I gave it a watch, and I regret to inform the people that I did not over the moon love this movie, which I mean, I liked it. So, I mean, it's certainly not a negative review of the movie, but there were a couple things that I had some problems with, specifically with the romance, actually, more than anything else. But there were some things I liked, some things I didn't.
Well, I'm almost glad that you don't exactly love it. It's kind of gonna show this more grounded discussion. So we got
Mhm.
a little bit of both sides. I selected the film because of the first two episodes being emotionally taxing films. Like it's ish, I guess, is kind of fun, but it's like a horror. And then Hereditary is extremely taxing, and then even Goodwill Hunting is pretty taxing on the emotions as well. So my thought process selecting this film was like, what's the most fun, cute movie that I can select that isn't like an animated film, because
Yeah,
I wasn't ready to discuss animated films yet, and so Amelie popped up in my mind, and I made Joey watch it.
I was saying that that's a really good way to describe it, actually. I thought it was a cute movie. It was really, it was kind of charming in a way, and it was cute, and it was really goofy. Did not see coming how goofy this movie was and how much of a comedic approach it took.
I'm glad you also saw that kind of lighthearted nature from the film. I was just gonna transition into being like, okay, so what are the two of your favorite aspects of this film.
Okay. So the first thing I want to say that is my favorite part of the movie is the lead performance from the actress who plays Amélie herself. I thought she was really incredible, and she was really in tune with what the movie was trying to say because she wasn't particularly grounded in her performance, I would say. Like she was kind of a little goofy, but she really worked for what the film was going for, and she brought an energy to it that I thought was really interesting and investing. So that was like my favorite thing about it.
Mm. I agree. I love her performance so much. It's so there's like a childlike innocence in it, yet there is also this adult um tone in her performance. It's not like she's an adult that acts like a kid and like that that would make her unlikable, cuz like, you don't want to act like a kid when you're an adult. But she's not like an adult that is like fully adult either. Or even slightly adult. She's really juvenile, but it's
Yeah,
but but she never loses that charm is what I'm saying.
that's true. She does give off a really innocent sense about her. You know, she's got like the wide-eyed kind of naivety to like the role where like everything she sees is like she's looking for the optimistic side of everything, and I could like feel that in her performance. And she really like carried the movie on her shoulders for me because it was like all about her. Hence the movie being called um
But what was the second favorite quality that you found in the film?
second thing that I loved very, very much was the musical score.
Ooh,
And I just ate it up. It was like so cliche French. It was so overtly French. It's like it was not apologizing, not subtle at all, and it was really fun and goofy. And I downloaded it immediately after I watched the movie. I was all in on the score.
I'm smiling so hard because that's actually the same thing I did the first time I watched it.
It was almost like comedic by itself. Like you could listen to the music and just laugh, you know? It
Mhm.
it had like a playful innocence to it, like the way a kid would see France. And it's like almost as if Amelie wrote the score herself. It would sound about like what they did in the movie.
Yeah, I understand that too. It's like it had an energy, of like a child and the awe of like France of that child. But also it sometimes took a turn and that mimicked Amelie's character where she's like some of the time she's super driven and happy and go lucky almost. And then like a scene later, she would be like super emotionally like wrecked and stuff like that. And I feel like that soundtrack, it's the melody was simultaneously something that was super fun and charming, but also it could turn around at a moment's notice and be like somber and melancholic.
Yeah, I guess this kind of goes back to me thinking about like the performance of her. She always seems to like have this little charm that like elevates the movie and it makes me really attached to her character. There's some things she does though that I do not agree with. And it kind of turns me off in the film. And I want to mention one of them right now. I
Okay.
just because I'm I just thought about it. I'm very passionate about it. If you like a guy and this guy you never even talked to once in your life, and then I know she's like innocent and she's like childlike, but I feel like it's really, really weird to have like a mystery to go find you. Like that, I don't get it. And I'd like you to talk about that scene where basically the storyline where she's just like staying away from him, and she's like having him solve a mystery to come find her.
I think that it's kind of close to why I selected this film, because generally I do like those kinds of realistic, almost depressing or pessimistic depictions of love. I do like that contrast sometimes, to have this almost fantasy like love story, which is why I feel like that can be something that turns other people off. Because yes, she just sees him, like, literally never has a conversation with him the entire film, and yet their love is supposed to be viewed as true, that there's no one else out there for her besides him. And when they get together at the end, it's almost simultaneously, "Wait, you haven't even spoken to him yet, like, barely, and 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 I don't really know why you're in love with him," but at the same time, it's like that kind of almost Disney princess kind of, vibe, the fantasy romance, and in terms of the, almost like cat and mouse game that she plays, I have, like, two thoughts about that. One is that she is childlike, like you said, and that's almost a quality that can be admirable most of the film. For me, it's all the film, but I guess for you in this moment, it's like something that turns you off. But at the same time, it does talk about this in the film. The first time she hints um, that she has his photo album, sh- he posts around on a bunch of photo booths, like, I want to meet at this cafe. If you want to meet and return my photo album, I know you have it. I know you tried to contact me. Would you just meet here? And the narrator, he talks about it when she's laying in bed and she's staring at the poster or the paper the Nino had been posting around saying, "Let's meet here." She's staring at it in bed, and then she goes to bed, and it zooms in on it, and the narrator says, he says, "Why doesn't she, like, just go there?" It's called a reality check, but that's the last thing Amelie wants. And so she's insecure and she's scared, and she's like simultaneously wanting this fantasy of like this chase, of like being this mystery girl, and falling in love with the idea that he is. And right after the narrator says that, she falls asleep, and the paintings that she has, like the dogs and the duck, they start coming to life, and they say, "Oh, poor Amelie, she's fallen in love." I can agree that that if you just purely look at it as childlike and you take that scene in the film as, like, something that really happened, then you can see how, like, yeah, she's childish as hell, especially when she, finally meets up with him and, like, she, like, calls him from, like, a phone booth, like, that's, like, 20 feet away, and then she gets him to,
Yeah.
like, walk all the way up the stairs and look in the telescope-ish thing, or a binocular type thing, and then she, like, puts it in his thing, and then she runs away. It's
Yeah,
super
no, that's
childish.
the scene I'm talking about. That's specifically what I mean. Is like if I always for those kind of scenes, I'm like, if I were to put myself in the position of the guy and I just want my photo back, like my book back, and then this lady just keeps on dragging me all over the place just so she can put it back in the original spot that I was. I was like, God damn it. I just want my book. And she's just taking me on this journey. And that's the way that I felt. But apparently that guy just fell hopelessly in love instead, which is cool. I mean, like, that's the point of the movie. I think it's an argument for true love. The leap for me, I just think I'm a very like lazy person, and I don't like when people like waste my energy, like when I have to like walk farther than I should or anything. But when when he had to walk all the way up the stairs for her to put it in his motorcycle, I was like, oh man, he just wasted so much time.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. If I were to put myself in those shoes, I'd be like, "Hell n." But that's what I think is, the point of the film is just more to be like a fantasy. Almost like, you know how, like, in Cinderella, she loses her slipper, right? And she, like,
Mhm.
they fell in love at first sight, but she's too like, for her, it's, like, circumstantial, like, she doesn't wanna come out and be like, "I'm the girl here, let me fit my foot in," because of her, like, stepmother and her, stepsisters, and so he has to, like, do this kind of extra chase, like, to go around the
Yeah,
kingdom fitting people's, shoes in, so that's more of, like, an external, whereas, like, in Amélie, it's, like, an internal struggle because she's afraid, of a lot of things, and I feel like this is almost kind of parallel to, Good Will Hunting, that's
yeah. Oh,
whereas that's, like, realistic, like, you know, internal issues. Amelie has realistic internal issues that she deals with in a fantastical kinda way. Um, when I watched that scene, I literally wrote down on my notes, I was like, "This girl is so extra, but I love it."
yeah. Yeah, I think that's just where we differ a little bit, because we both agree that she's really extra. And it is funny. Like it is definitely like a charming scene. What I do like is they definitely put it in the plot earlier. Like they had pretenses to her being that way because I think in her mind she wants to be someone like Cinderella because in her family she didn't really get a lot of attention from her father and her mother died when she was young. So I can totally understand her motivation to want the attention and like want someone to like really believe in her, to just look at her and see that she has value. um I guess I have more of a problem with the guy following into that because I don't know, I think I'm just a stickler. I can't imagine just looking someone and being like, I want to follow you around for weeks.
Yeah, I could totally understand that view. I think there's, like, this little, um, nihilistic, pessimistic, front not, like, front, but, like, surface, to me, like, that's, like, generally who I am, but there's almost this, like, hopeless romantic at the very, like, core, and so I can enjoy well, I actually kind of enjoy the extremes of each, like, I enjoy really melancholic, sad, love falls apart always films, and then I enjoy these kinds of, like, fairy tales almost.
Yeah.
But it's gonna be kind of funny because if we're gonna transition into my 2 favorites,
Uh-huh.
it actually didn't end up being acting or music.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, kind of exciting, right? We're
Oh,
literally just talking about how it would be funny if every single week we would think of 2 of our favorite things, and they just happen to be the exact same every week.
yeah, I'm pretty excited actually. I can yeah, okay. What are your things?
I would have to put editing as my number 1 and writing as my number 2. I was just gonna start talking about the writing and how that, because you started touching on it about how they foreshadowed these kinds of issues that she has. So it's not like coming out of left field. And I wanna talk about how the writing actually sets that up. One of the most, influential or impactful lines early in the film is when they talk about how her dad thought that she had problems with her heart because
Oh, yeah.
she would never like, her dad would never give her physical contact, like hugs or kisses or anything like that. So much so that, like, whenever she got a yearly, checkup, this that kind of physical contact that she got during those checkups made her heart race. And so her dad thought that there was something wrong with her heart, and because of that, she was homeschooled to not go to public school anymore and not make friends and that kind of stuff. And in a later line, it says that she became a person that made a lot of imaginary friends. I loved how the first almost like 10 or 20, no, not 10, like 5 or 10 minutes of the film is like straight up narration. And so it sets up this girl that like doesn't know, she just doesn't really know how the world works. And so the first 30 minutes of the film focuses on her finding and returning this box to that man now. And she says that if I return this and it brings the person joy, I will dedicate my life to creating more happiness. And that's the kind of thing that I loved about the subtleness of the writing. She has moments of like sadness, but instead of dealing with that, she constantly tries and finds things to do. Literally all the times where she's like alone, the sadness starts to like engulf on her. And so what she does to try and deal with this, instead of in like a healthy way, she just chases making other people feel good, or doing things for other people. Like literally the whole film is just her like meddling in like so many people's lives.
Yeah.
And it's almost annoying, but it almost makes you feel bad for her.
No, yeah, for sure. Um, and just a quick thing on the narrator too. Specifically the narration. A lot of times in movies, narration can be like 50-50 for me, where it's like, did you really need this? But I think this was maybe the best narration I've ever heard in a movie ever. Like it was so fast and it was so fun to listen to. There was literally when the narration ended at the beginning, I was like, "Oh
Mhm.
man." And I was like in the middle of the movie, I was like, "Man, I could really use this narration." And then he came back and I was like, "Oh, yay." But I agree with you about the motivation of the character of Amélie, and it's something that's like really easy to sympathize with. Um, and I know a lot of people like a really tight plot, but for me personally, I'm willing to meander a little bit in the story if it means getting to know a
Mhm.
character a little bit better. You know, I like characters more than plot. I like to see the way the characters are motivated, and then it's fun to see how all their motivations meld together that comes into a plot. But I enjoyed I enjoyed the part at the beginning of the movie with her trying to give the box to someone. And I didn't know at the time that it wasn't the A storyline. Like I kind of thought that it was going to be
Mhm.
the whole movie at that point because they were setting it up like kind of that way, but then it's answered by like the end of the first act really. And and I thought it was an interesting turn. Like it was a surprise, but I wasn't like it wasn't like they pulled the rug under you or anything, but it was a nice surprise to see, oh, well, where's the movie going from here? And for her to like be meddling in people's lives, I thought that was really cool. How she was the guy's name
Mhm.
Joseph at the cafe thing that she just like takes him and then she
Mhm.
tries to hint that her friend is actually into him and everything. And she ends up getting them together, and that's just really funny to me
Mhm.
as like a B storyline. But I think the best part about that is that near the end of the movie, they hint that they're not going to really end up very well together. Kind of goes back to the same tendencies
Mhm.
he had with the first girl, and she's like starting to freak out about it, like any normal person would. It kind of shows that, like, while she can help as much as she can, it's really like an internal conflict that these guys need to put upon themselves to try to fix themselves. as opposed to like someone just like coming in and fixing everything, which I liked as a
Yeah, now that
subtlety
you
in the
mention
writing.
that, I like how that parallels with Amelie's own story. Kind of like how you were talking about how the couple um is hinted as not working out in the end because intrinsically those people haven't dealt with their issues yet. Um, and so although Amelie gets them
Mhm.
together and she kinda smiles when they, like, go in the restroom together, it makes her happy momentarily and it makes them happy momentarily, but in the end, they need to deal with their own issues, and she needs to deal with her own issues, you know? Um
The best part of the writing to me was the way that they created like an atmosphere or an ambiance. Like you almost got like a 360 view of her one block of her neighborhood with like her living quarters and then the market on the bottom floor. It's almost as if they're writing it like you are shadowing Amelie for a couple weeks and you get about as much as you would know if you were shadowing them. Like you know who the writer is and who Joseph is and who what her two friends
Mhm.
who work there are like. It I think it sacrifices the plot to a degree, but
Yeah, I totally agree with that statement. Generally, when you hear world building, you're thinking of some kind of like huge universe, which is very impressive to build. But generally, you think of like Star Wars. It doesn't have to be a huge world. You're just adding more detail into a small world, kind of like writing a book. Like instead of writing a whole
that's
book.
literally what I was just about to. Yeah, yeah, no, I agree with you. Yeah, keep
Yeah,
going.
like, instead of writing a whole book on, like, a huge universe like Lord of the Rings, you have, like, one book that just, expands on, like, maybe a second in time and, like, a whole chapter on, like, a second in time and focusing on, like, every single person and describing, like, every single, like, bug and wallpaper and everything like that. I don't know if what we were saying
Oh,
was the same.
no, no, it was exactly the same because it felt as if like the writers of the screenplay were basically verbatim taking pages from a book that they wrote. Even though they're showing it like any other movie would, it feels so much more familiar to you. It's almost like when you get to the end of a sitcom and you know like every set and you
Mhm,
have that like familiarity with like the entire way that the apartment is if you're like in Seinfeld or Friends or
mhm,
Parks and Rec or anything.
mhm.
Um, it almost has that kind of familiarity to it, even though it only has 2 hours to tell its story as opposed to um, cajillions of hours. Sitcom.
But that transitions me to one of, if not my favorite scene in the film. She sees the blind man, which she had seen, once before, and so she took him in her arms, and she led him across the street, and through the street, and the market that are, like, on the street sides, and she just described everything she could, about like chickens and fruits and the people and who they're talking to and what it smelled like and the entire time this guy is just smiling so big and the writing there is just so beautiful. And then as soon as she lets him off, she doesn't like stay for a thank you or anything like that. She's like, and now we're at the steps and now I'm gonna leave you or something like that. And then the editing right there too, or special effects or whatever, like, he just starts shining like an actual sun. Like, he just looks up and he just, like, shines, like, brighter and brighter, and that kind of on the nose editing just works so well for this kind of, like, childlike film. Uh, and so, yeah, right there is, like, one of, if not my favorite scenes in the film. I don't know if you have any, but right there is writing and the editing slash special effects, that became my 2 favorite aspects of the film.
Yeah, I kind of had like a similar like happiness of that scene, but it was actually a little hindered for me because I just think it was it was so fast, you know? Like
Uh
she takes him and she like just does all this and it's like super fast paced. And I just couldn't help imagining if I was like an old blind man and some lady just takes me and she just like brings me across the street. I'm like, ah, what's going on? Like
just spitballing
I
like
just
10,000 lines.
yeah, I feel like I'd just be more like have way too much of a sensory overload to be happy. I'd be like, well, who are you? I really felt happy for like the guy because it would be one of those things where I'd feel like, whoa, what's going on? But a little later I'd be like, oh, that person was being really nice. But
Wait,
I
did you have a favorite scene at all? Oops. I
a favorite scene.
mean, it's all good if you don't have one. I didn't know if you had like some kind of highlight. Um,
Yes, yes, I do. I do. I love this part of the movie. I really love this part. Um, it was when she finds out what the bald guy was doing at the phone booth. And it turned out he was just a mechanic that was working on a broken phone booth. And they all had, and her and Nino, yeah, her and Nino um, were both following like this mystery. And they're like, wow, who would this guy be? And they just filled out everything they thought about his life and they like totally romanticized everything.
one of them said like maybe he's someone that's afraid to die. Maybe he's about to die and he's afraid that no one will remember him, and so he takes these pictures all the time and rips them up in an effort to like preserve himself almost.
And then she opens the curtain and she sees the man and she realizes what he is. And it's like such a practical um, reason for him to be there, but it's almost more romantic than anything that they came up with. That they
Hmm.
were like romantically wrong, and he ended up just being a mechanic. But it was like really beautiful the way that they edited that scene together, I thought.
I like how Amelie really balances the mundane aspects and the realistic aspects of life while also depicting this fantasy of life, and it never felt cheated in either way for me. Um, I never felt like some of the mundane aspects were like too mundane, and I never felt like the romanticized aspects were like too romanticized, and I never felt like they they used something that should have been mundane and made it romanticized, or something that should have been romanticized and then made it mundane. It was always like, ah, yeah, that guy's a mechanic. That makes so much sense. But these kinds of scenes that like make you smile and builds the character even more, but really hasn't have nothing to do with plot. And now that we described it as like a book, it's it becomes so much more unique, and so much more interesting to have these kinds of quote unquote book qualities in a film. Like for example, one of the earlier scenes is uh she lost the fish. Her mom was like nerves and stuff like that. She gave her a camera, and so she went around and take pictures of things, and then when she took a pictures of cars, they got in a crash, and her neighbor was like, "Yo, this is your fault. This is why you're taking pictures, and it causes these things." And she's like, "Oh shit, I've been taking pictures all day long, rip." And she goes on the news, and there's just like a bunch of bad stuff, and she's like, "Oh no." But then it doesn't dwell on that. Like she finds out that her neighbor is lying, and then she just like goes on top of his roof and just unplugs
Oh,
just unplugs his freaking TV while listening to the radio and finding out like the climactic moments of a soccer game, and just unplugs the TV whenever, or the satellite or whatever, whenever those climactic scenes went on. And I'm just like, these those kinds of scenes just make me smile, and it really has nothing to do with like the rest of the film, except for maybe creating her character a little bit more, but it just kinda just kinda makes me laugh.
yeah, yeah, for sure. Those little scenes, those have to be like my favorite part of the movie. Um, or some of them. Obviously, I said my favorite scene was the mechanic, but these little scenes that just like don't have much to do with the plot, but are just really, really funny and build the character of Amelie. I just love. Like I almost forgot about like the camera scene, and I was like, that's incredible. That's like such a childlike reaction. And such a childlike response. I think one of my favorite things that has like all of the scenes in it is just the way that the writers capture romanticism of the mundane. I feel like every little thing in the movie was romanticized. It's almost as if the writers had so much attention to detail and passion for like every single item that they ever wrote about. Like the guy that told her the cameras caused the accident. I felt like they were so in tune with what that character is, even though he was like almost a bit of a caricature and he was just like really animated. I felt like they had so much passion for that little guy and they had passion for like the set and like how they wanted to frame the scene with her listening to the radio and pulling it out. Um, it's inspiring because it's also like a way that I really enjoy to think in my life where you like romanticize everything, even to an unhealthy degree almost, where it's really fun to just like have passion and just like see everything as if like you're empathizing with the people who enjoy that certain thing or made that certain thing. Honestly, hits kind of close to
I
home and
know,
kind of
right? I
hurts.
was like tearing up at work, and I'm like,
But
she falls in love so easily and like cares so much about a lot of things, and that's why I identified with that more, leading Nino on like a little chase because like that kind of like insecure nature that she has. Um, I'd like to highlight one line that kind of that coupled with those recent scenes kind of paint the picture of who Amelie is, at least for the majority of the film. As soon as she gets home, she had first returned the box to the dude, and then second led the blind guy through the streets. But as soon as she got home, she quotes her parents, and she says, speaking about herself, she can't relate to other people. She was always a lonely child. And this leads to a scene of her crying, watching TV about her and her own loneliness. That's why I love when she watches TV because the TV talks about her. It's so funny. The TV's like, "Oh, Amelie, like, what is she gonna do? Is she gonna die alone? Is she gonna commit suicide?" And as she was dying, her last moments were filled with regret that she let her dad live a stifled life. And so, like, watching the TV is pretty much her inner monologue. And because her character is kind of like quiet, the narrator and the film, I mean, the TV and the animals that come to life, around her, those people or things, spoke for her, you know?
yeah, I totally agree with that. I think it was a really good justification of the character because Amelie is so very much introverted that she just doesn't talk a lot at all throughout the movie, really.
Mhm.
Um, that it makes more sense almost to like for us to get inside her head and understand her inner dialogue. And I thought they continued to do creative ways to do that throughout the movie. So I totally agree with you. It was really cool to see like the narration and then the television or the animals. And it's like you could tell a lot also from the faces that she was making that even when she was talking, she wasn't quite comfortable in her own skin.
Mhm.
Um, I would say until like I think the scene with her when she finally meets Nino for the first time. I think that's like the only time in the movie that I see her like very clearly confident in her own skin, you know?
Mhm. Well, before I have a second, part of the film that I feel like really encapsulates the whole Amelie and the themes, and the personality of Amelie. For that, I kinda wanna go and highlight some scenes to describe more about why I love the editing. So there's the scene where she asked Nino to meet her at the cafe at like this time exactly. And as soon as that time hit, her brain just goes on like overdrive, because he's late. And she's like, "Why is he late? Is he not coming? Did he get in a car crash?" Like, and it just plays all of these scenes. It like shows all of these scenes. It's not like her like talking to someone being like, "Oh, is he late?" Like, or "Where's this guy? Like, I wonder if he's okay." Like, it's not dialogue. It's like her inner thoughts that are projected out. And I feel like that kind of introverted nature is what I identify with so much because we don't exactly speak every concern, at least when we immediately have them. It's more like it festers in our mind and it grows and it becomes, like, almost unrealistic, like, he could
Yeah.
just be running late, like, he doesn't maybe in a car crash, like, what? Like, what led your mind to that? And then because she, like, gives her coworker the note to slip into his pocket, that once he reads it and he asks the coworker to leave with him, she looks back at them 2 leaving, and her introverted, like, childlike, overthinking nature, he probably thinks that she wrote that the coworker wrote the note, and now he thinks that, like, this is the person he likes, or this is the person that's been trying to pursue him, and he's gonna go off and go with her. And then instead of, like, saying any of that, she literally just turns around, watches them 2 leave, and then she just melts into water.
I totally empathize with, like, the way that she thinks because she totally has, like, introvert mindset, which is, like, really cool to see, like, on screen in such a realized fashion.
Mhm.
Um, because I can empathize with a lot of the things that she does, like, especially, like, that part where she like, "The movie's just done me dirty."
And that's, like comes to the last one I wanna highlight, real quick, after melting to water or whatever, and she starts, like, stress baking or, like, sad baking. It's so endearing, and it's like a shot of her baking, and on the top left-hand corner and the top right-hand corner, there's, like, empty space, or at least, like, it's just background, so thought bubbles kind of like appear and it's like her coworker and Nino like getting together and then another thought bubble appears and like it's like more fears and stuff like that. And then I think it's like her cat or like something that knocks the curtains behind her and then a thought bubble appears and she just imagines that it's Nino like sneaking up on her and being like, "You know what? Like you're mistaken. Like, I actually like you, and I know it was and I'm here to, like, have this beautiful reunion." And then she turns around, and it's just her cat, um, knocking at the curtains, but those noises, like so it's not like nothing knocked the curtain, something knocked the curtain, and her wishful thinking, her childlike, like, fantasy is like, not if it was just him, like, maybe it's just him, that little hope that she always has. And that was, like, the most heartbreaking, um, part of the film for me was that scene where she imagines him coming back. Oof.
I definitely agree with that. More like, another thing that I liked is, like, how they displayed, like, the anxiety in the character, because I
Yeah.
think a lot of us can relate to, uh, something so small happening, and then your imagination just goes off very vividly with every single thing that could have possibly gone wrong,
Mhm.
and, like, just considering every, like, possible situation and getting, like, overwhelmed in your brain, and I thought they did such a good job visually of, like, describing that, specifically with what you were saying when she, like, opens up the curtain, even when, like even when there's, like, no sense of, like, time, like, he hasn't done anything to, like, disappoint her, like, being late or anything, but she's just, like, anxious anyway, because that's just, like, everything that's on her mind right now.
The last thing, that I thought was, like, a personification of the film and of Amélie is the discussion that she has with the, uh, last man, I think his name is Raymond. about the girl with a glass of water in his painting. And every time they talk about it, it's literally him talking about her and her talking about her, but just not like like her not like confronting that fact. Like she knows he's talking about her and she knows she's talking about her, but they still don't directly talk about her. He says that she has insecurities and she says that maybe she just doesn't fit in. If you watch the movie again and you just listen to their dialogue on this girl that is drinking a cup of water in his painting, um, it's the first time, or maybe even the only time that she verbally explores herself. Like,
Yeah,
in the film, she like like not like actively, but like physically explores herself by like doing this and doing that and running from this and maybe this girl had no friends as a child and so because of that she has trouble connecting with those around her and Raymond is like or maybe she's just afraid of connecting with the people around her and she's afraid that she's just gonna um be disappointed and this is why she disconnects herself from the rest of the painting and I thought that was one of the most enjoyable dialogues of the film.
that's really funny because I didn't really think about it before that that was the only time in the movie where she actually discussed um the problems like in herself and like her flaws and like those were actually some of my least favorite scenes in the movie.
Feels
It,
bad.
it just felt too over the top for me and too obvious,
Mhm,
too goofy. I don't know. It's just like there's a lot of times where I see myself in Amelie,
mhm.
and I'd be like, if I were her, then I would immediately recognize who the girl he's talking about in the painting, and I would probably just shut down even more. Um, so it's really kind of just a personal thing, but just a personal vendetta. I don't know. It just didn't quite work for me.
That's almost like a compliment that regardless of how, like, scenes work or didn't work for you, the fact that you related with Amelie so much that when she did things that you thought um, weren't the way you would have done them or the way that she should have handled them or things like that, that it it had an effect on you, you know? It wasn't just like, "Oh, I don't care about this character." It's like you care so much that well, for me, like, I understand and I relate, and I would probably do the same thing almost, which is good and bad, with everything she does, but, um, but equally as skillful a film that creates a character that you care about so much that when they do something that you disagree with, you care a lot about them doing that thing that you disagree with, you know?
Yeah, that's very true. That's like exactly what I was doing because I really love the character of Amelie so much. I just think she's so far and away the best part of the movie that when she does something I don't agree with, I get very upset with her. Like I'm like, what are you doing? No. Like when she was like talking about the girl, I was like, you see what he's doing? He's trying to get in your head. You can't let him do that. That's not right.
But
Or like when she I mean obviously it was technically the right thing to do.
oh, okay, yeah. I
But
was like, "Yeah, he's trying to help her," you know?
no, that's just like the way my brain would be like.
Mhm.
But he definitely trying to be helpful. Or at like the very end when she sees Nino for the first time and she just like touches his nose and I was like, well that's just kind of strange to have for like the first meeting to start that way.
Isn't that a dream, Joey? Come on.
I know it
Fall in love
I
at
would
first sight, don't even need to say anything, meet for the first time and just start making out.
That's so
Who hurt
boring.
you, Joey? Who hurt you? No, I'm kidding, but yeah. Yeah, that kind of, realistic way to look through life. Yeah, it's a little awkward, you know, you just, "Hi, I'm that person," and she starts touching him, like, "Okay."
Yeah.
But yeah,
Um,
we can start getting into maybe like what you I don't know. I guess you have been talking about what you didn't like, but is there anything that you specifically want to say or like point out that you haven't before, or like to consolidate everything into a certain aspect that you didn't like?
well, I really went over every individual scene. I wasn't a big fan of.
Mhm.
Um, I guess if I were to really put it all together for me, I think it's mostly like I love to romanticize things, but for me personally, I don't like the philosophy of having a true love.
Mhm.
So when I see it in films, be it like this movie or Cinderella, for example,
Mhm.
um, I just can't connect to it as much as some other people can because I have a disconnect. Like, not only do I don't agree with the idea of true love, but I'm not a big fan of the philosophy of true love either.
Mhm.
And so it's just like it's kind of a disconnect for me personally when I see like that as the main message on screen. Um, I really like there's so much of this movie that I really enjoy, and I wish I could love it as much. And I have a feeling, I mean, I'm gonna watch this movie again, probably with you, um, just to like because it's done so many things, it deserves a second watch because
Mhm.
there's so much passion put into it. But that's really like you got to get on board with that if you want to like totally fall head over heels for the movie. And I just didn't, I don't think.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with that. You kind of have to have uh this hopeless romantic in you somewhere. It doesn't keep you from liking the movie. It just maybe keeps you from loving the movie, you know? So even if you aren't this kind of like hopeless romantic person or anything like that, I would say that it's a good watch. Just to maybe notice writing or editing or music or acting, you know, there's plenty of other things to love in this film. Um even if you can't hop 100% on board with this kind of love at first sight idea. But similar to Goodwill Hunting and because these are all films, this is my choice of film, so um, it's a film that I love. If I had to talk about things that I didn't like, they would be again like Goodwill Hunting, and not specifically anything that I actually didn't like, but more things that I don't understand. I do want to mention one last thing is that um, when you're talking about the theme or perhaps the main idea of the film being like this true love, I think that it is what the film is made the majority of the film is about, but I do not think that the crux theme of the film or the crux idea of the film is love, and I think for me, it's it mirrors this one last line that Raymond gives to Amélie. Sh she tapes stuff and she gives it to him, and so for his last present to her, he tapes something and gives it to her, and he tapes this video of himself, nothing from TV or anything like that, but he delivers it to her, and this is near the very end of the film, when she's, like, battling this, like, "Should I talk to him? I'm insecure, like, is did he go off um, with my coworker or not? Like, am I just gonna get hurt or what?" He, like, puts it and, like, puts, like, candles around her TV, and he puts it in there, and then she presses play, and he's "You I have" I guess we should have mentioned this earlier. I did mention it a little bit here and there, but Raymond has, like, this disease or illness or something like that that makes his, bones brittle, like glass brittle, and so they call him the glass man. Um, but in this last tape that he gives to her, he says you are not me. Like, your bones are not made of glass. They don't break easy. Um, you have the ability to go out there, and to take risks and to fight for what you love. Um, so me watching you not do that is like one of the most offensive things, you know, like he has to sit inside all day because if he just takes a step outside, he's probably going to fracture or break a bunch of bones. But she doesn't have that. And so he says, go and fight and run after what you want, and don't just sit around here and cry and mope around in your own mind, you know? And so that's the last thing, right? And then she watches that and she turns around and she's like, all right, well, I'm gonna go to Nino and I'm gonna like find him and I'm gonna like talk to him. And as soon as she gets to the door, he's on the other side. And that's when they like meet up for the first true time, and fall in love. And then the little like music plays on the last scene and they're just riding together on his motorcycle, and 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 they look at the camera for like half a second or a second. And honestly, that was like almost like pointing at you, like you're not,
Yeah.
yeah, like you don't have glass bones. Like go out there and run towards what you want in life, you know?
I think that's really funny that you mentioned that because that reminds me a lot of Ben Affleck's speech from Good Will Hunting that we talked about last weekend.
Yeah.
Uh, it's kind of the same kind of uh, theme in essence,
Mhm.
where it's like saying to go out there. And you're right. I shouldn't have said that true love is like the most important theme in the movie. Um, I think it's an important theme.
Mhm.
It's
Definitely.
but it's not. I don't think it's everything in the movie. Like as much as I think it's more of like a character study, really.
Mhm. But it's funny because I didn't select this film as like, "Oh, this parallels, Good Will Hunting." I literally just found, like, this theme inside it while rewatching. I'm like, "Wait, yeah, this is a." Maybe it's just 'cause those kinds of similar themes are what become the films that I fall in love with, because I like identify with that so much. Either that or it's just perfectly nice coincidence that this kind of circling back around to almost the same theme from these two not coordinated selections of movies at all.
No, I think that's going to be a really cool thing about our podcast is um we're going to get to dive deep, really deep on like a bunch of movies now over the year, and we can see how like different movies we talk about are like all very similar, even though they're in such different atmospheres, or like how different two movies are versus how similar they are.
Hmm.
And like we'll get a chance to like go on like a film journey together, and it seems like
Aw.
it'll be pretty cool. That's like really cheesy. That's why I kind of tapered off at the end, but it's like
No, you
I
gotta
think
have
it's true though.
confidence.
Yeah, oh shit. If Amelie's taught me anything.
Yes.
I genuinely I really love to talk about movies that I love, but I
Hmm.
also like to talk about movies that I don't love, or movies that I hate, or movies that I like just like,
Hmm.
because I think the conversation it's very similar in a way where you're still like breaking down every single part of the movie, and it's like kind of a thing like with all film where I like to dissect, well, why is it that I didn't like this scene as much as this scene? Because a
Hmm.
lot of times I feel like I saw what was on screen and I just had like a certain like emotional response. And part of me analyzing a film is trying to just dissect why the emotional response was the way it was.
And I rarely fall in love with films the first time I see them. Honestly, almost sometimes the opposite. Kind of like the music I like to listen to. It's that movie that you didn't exactly love on your first viewing, but it kind of affected you subtly. and after watching it more times, it became something I loved. And I'm not saying that like you just need to watch it more times, then you'll love it or anything like that. But it is interesting to see when we start discussing films that you have seen and that I haven't that yeah, that you have seen and I haven't, that initial first watch is always gonna be difficult for me to fall in love regardless of how good the film is. So, I think we trust, or at least I trust, enough that we are gonna select films that are good regardless of whether it personally affects us or not. So, I generally am afraid of talking about films that I don't love or just like or even dislike because it's hard for me to like talk about something I don't love for a very long time. But I think that we select films that are like masterful regardless of whether they affect either one of us to like our cores. And so even if there's not like some kind of huge emotional thing that we're like, oh my gosh, like it affected me, it changed my life, like I'm a different person now, at least we can talk about how skillful the film was in its making. And I think that'll prevent us from ever running out of things to say, you know?
Yeah, for sure I think we can make it to at least an hour for All right, guys. So that was the end of our podcast. If you would like more, we have a couple more podcasts on our video box, and we post every Thursday. So stay tuned for next Thursday when we do a podcast on Silver Linings Playbook. That will be our next one.
Ooh.
Very exciting. Oh yeah, don't forget to subscribe and stuff. You know, give us that thumbs up because it would I can't speak for Josh, but it'd be really fucking cool if one person liked our video. Like,
Things are doing something right, no, maybe.
yeah,
It
yeah,
would
it'd
mean
be
a lot,
totally dope.
so, it's not just
Yeah,
yelling to
I'd remember it for a while. And also, I've got an Instagram called Joey Film Spotlight, where I spotlight classic or independent films every Monday and Friday. So if you guys want to check that out, that'd be a blast. But yeah, we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.